Welcome back to another episode of the Street Legal Legends Car Build Series. This is the Volunteer. This is a box. My name is Sean, and this is Yankee Auto Systems. In this episode of the Volunteer Build Series, I'm going to show you guys what I've been up to off camera in the background. I've got a box, and it's a very important box. What's in the box? What's in the box, man? Some very important stuff. This is the major component that I've selected for this car to make this street legal adaptable. I have been searching and searching ever since I started this process to try and find something that was relatively easy to use, gave me every functionality that I needed, and it wasn't terribly expensive. It took a while, but I found one. Let's jump into what's in the box and I'll show you what I've been up to. As I already mentioned, since I started this process about 7 months ago, I have been searching and searching to try and find one end-all be-all kit that has everything that I need in it. I've been to Speedway Motors, I've looked at standalone wire harnesses, I've looked at wire harnesses from other cars. I've considered purchasing another car just to pull everything out of it, or scrapping my S10 truck and using all of those components too. Also considered buying a motorcycle that's scrapped just for the good harness in it and use that. However, all of those options didn't leave me at the end result that I really wanted without much extra work. However, I finally found something that I think is going to be the solution, or at least my solution, to getting these vehicles street legal, or at least adapted for street use. Now granted, this does not have everything in it, but I'm going to say there's probably about 90% of what I need in one kit. And all I have to do after it's installed is hook it to power and ground. That's right, I don't have to terminate any wires if I don't want to. I don't have to lay out the entire wire harness wire by wire and figure out where everything's going to go. It's already done. I've already found that kit, and it was relatively inexpensive. So let's go ahead and jump into what's inside of the kit, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. First things first, we have the instruction manual. I'm going to put that off to the side. I will need that. It's not going to be completely exactly the same because I've purchased it for something that's used for something else, but I'm going to make it work. There does seem to be a plastic tunnel inside of the box. I believe that that's used for the original equipment that it's actually intended for. I'm going to try and repurpose this to hide my wires, and if I have to run anything underneath the trans tunnel that's there, I'm going to make use of this because it's a heck of a lot easier than the way I've been doing it. Next thing out of the box is the showpiece. This is the major component that I've been looking for. This solves a lot of my issues. This is a multifunction switch that has a light controller and a hazard switch already tied into it. That's right, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to buy an additional hazard switch. I don't have to buy an additional headlight switch. I don't have to buy that rocker turn signal switch that I've used before. Everything's here. It even has a horn button on the end of it. So when I tell you that I think this is going to solve most of my problems, I mean it. I think that this is the solution for me in this process of what I'm going through. What this does is it operates just like an automotive multifunction switch, which makes it even better. So you have your multifunction switch lever here on the end. You turn the multifunction switch up one, and it has a daytime running light feature. You turn it one more time, and then you get to your low beams. After that, it gets even better. It has a high beam function to it. That is sweet. That way I don't have to run two different sets of lights, one for high beams, one for low beams, try and wire everything extra. Everything is taken care of. I promise you, everything is inside of this unit. Next thing that it has on it, horn button right on the end. What I'm going to do is install this multifunction switch, and that's just going to make life so much easier from here and going forward. Next thing inside of the bag, the same bag where the multifunction switch was. It does come with a brake light switch as well. However, it's a brake pedal switch. It has 3 different switches inside of there. What you're intended to do is to mount this onto the brake pedal. I would assume that for the kit that it comes from, it's supposed to be mounted horizontally, and when you press on this pedal while it's mounted to the actual brake pedal lever itself, it then sends a signal through the butt connectors that are in here into the harness, telling the stoplight to function. That is something that could work. However, I'm probably not going to go that route with this kit and this setup. I am likely going to be using a brake fluid pressure switch in my builds. Next that comes out of the kit is the entire main harness. So the main harness built into it has headlights, daytime running lights. The headlights are low beam and high beam. It also has the turn signals built into that as well. There are other components inside of this box that I'm probably not going to use. The other components inside of the box are the headlights and the taillights. I may utilize the taillights. Not for the Volunteer build, but I may use them over on the Petty Chevy build. They are just simple, squared off LED lights. They are very bright and they do work for running lights, stop lights, and turn signals. So that is why that seems appealing as to why I might use it over on Petty Chevy. I have not yet figured out exactly the turn signal situation that I'm going to use for the rear of that, so that may be an option. Like I've said before, the Volunteer, I've always wanted that to actually be the more homage, period correct looking, but modern updated vehicle. So what that means is I'm going to be running round 5 3/4 inch headlights on the Volunteer as opposed to anything else that I could choose. I'm going to try and stick to a more period correct look with the Volunteer, but I am going to use LED headlights. I have found headlights that do have a low, a high, and a turn signal built into them, and also a daytime running light as well. Now that works great because that means the headlights that I've chosen also match all of the functionality that the harness can supply. So that's great. Lastly, included in the kit, besides the harness and everything else that I've already mentioned, is a horn. It is a small horn. It is a dinky horn. I may end up choosing a different horn, however, that horn should work perfectly fine. Changing out the horn is easy. So like I had said before, the entire component kit that I have purchased should have 90% of what I need for it. It should work perfectly well. And like I said earlier, all it needs to do once it's installed is hook up to power and ground. It's all there. It all runs to the light controller inside of the multifunction switch harness, and it all works from that. One fuse is needed. And I'll show you guys what I've been up to for about the past 4 hours already today. And here's what I've been busy working on. I've made a bracket that actually allows the multifunction switch to mount to it and live inside of the car in an easy to access area. I had originally intended for this bracket to be prototyped on the Petty Chevy car because the Petty Chevy does have a steering wheel, which I am currently lacking for the Volunteer. However, what I had found was that the steering column on the Petty Chevy measures about 10 inches from the heim joint here, and the Volunteer car measures only about 6 inches. So if I had prototyped it on the Volunteer, it would sit way too far out, and once I did get a steering wheel, I would have an issue. So I decided that if I could prototype it over on the Volunteer that has a shorter steering column, once I get to the point of producing more of these kits, I will be able to say that if you have at least a 6-inch clearance here, that it should fit your vehicle. What I was able to do once I had my template made was figure out where the bracket was going to sit within inside of the other steering wheel bracket. Luckily, this bracket does already have 2 holes drilled into it, so I was able to cut this bracket down to a length so that it would fit butt up against the angle of the steering wheel bracket here. Then I ended up adding some locating pins to the bracket so it wouldn't move side to side. Once I had that figured out, I was able to drill my first hole through it and bolt it together to find out exactly where everything was going to lay. Once I had that first bolt in, I then worked on taking the bracket off and figuring out where the second hole would be, because I would end up, and I did end up having to cut this bracket down. So I had to figure out where the second bolt would pass through. Once I had the second bolt in and actually had the bracket secured, I was able to have the pipe rest on top of the vice grips that were originally on the steering wheel column here, so that would give me an idea of the angle that I needed to cut the pipe at and the length that I needed to cut it at. Then after I had everything figured out, I welded it all together, and this is what I've come up with. I think it's a relatively straightforward answer for a lot of things that leaves me being able to mount the multifunction switch in a place that is accessible and make use of that multifunction switch, as opposed to having a bunch of holes in the dash panel and a bunch of other switches just like the petty Chevy car has. In this instance, I only have one switch that I have to worry about beside the hazard switch. And that's a wrap. I want to thank you for watching this episode of the Volunteer Build series, where I talked about exactly how I figured I was going to solve my issues of wiring harnesses, control panels, and everything that I needed to start getting these vehicles street legal. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, Yankee Auto Systems, and also follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Yankee Auto. And I hope that everyone enjoyed this week's video. Hopefully next week we'll be able to get back into the wiring harness and actually start laying everything out and test all of these components and see exactly how everything's going to work out for me. Until then, see you on the next one. What I had to do once I had the bracket mocked up and the pipe welded to it... Nope. What I ended up having to do once I was able to cut down the bracket to some... Nope, I didn't do that either.